Good morning, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another edition of Lovin Daily. I'm your host, Jonathan Cilia, joined by my co-host, Julian Bonici, and here are the headlines for today. Civil service head's brother charged in major money laundering case. Government to announce new Covid19 measures today. 3 women charged with prostitution offenses. Malta's Attorney General resigns. And Belarus protests get support in Malta. Julian, how's it going, man?
I'm well. Monday.
Monday back in the office. We've got quite a mix of stories. I mean, this weekend it seems like we had some things going up in the government as well as on the streets. Let's just jump right into the first story.
Yeah, so our first major story today involves Aldo Kotaya, the brother of civil service head Mario Kotaya. Essentially, he was charged in a major money laundering crime. After the police raided his home and found €500,000 in cash and $400,000 in a Dubai bank account. Right. So he used to serve as the Malta's Consul General in Shanghai. So for those of you who don't remember, that's the same role Sai Mitsi, the wife of disgraced former minister, I suppose, Konrad Mitsi, used to hold. He served from the post from 2018 to 2019, so obviously raising a lot of questions about what exactly he was doing in the role during that period. However, his appointment in itself is also raising a lot of serious questions. The opposition is even demanding a public inquiry into the case. Basically, this is because in 2004, Aldo Kotaya was perpetually interdicted for misappropriating public funds. For those of you who don't know, interdiction sort of prohibits anyone from holding a public role. Mm-hmm. Now, there's an issue even with that case because it was expunged from the online public record upon Aldo Kotaya's request, raising a lot of serious questions as to why exactly he was put back on the state payroll in 2013. And John, guess what happened in 2013? It was the same year his brother Mario Kotaya was appointed the head of civil service. Now, it's important to note Mario Kotaya himself has denied all wrongdoing and says that him and his brother's parts walk independently. But we'll have to see, obviously, how this develops pending an investigation.
Now, I mean, I think it's very, very worrying that someone in such a high public office, his brother, is doing these kind of deeds. But what's even more worrying in my view is that someone can get caught for doing something like this, misappropriating public funds, and then they can ask for that to be removed from their record. It's one thing if you're a private citizen, but it's another thing if you're a public servant working in the civil service to do something in 2004 and then in 2013 get another post. That's very, very questionable. But another thing that's really interesting to note here is that this comes ahead of the very, very important MONEYVAL test. This MONEYVAL will be looking at Malta's money laundering resume and how we're tackling it. This might be a sign that MONEYVAL is having a good effect. I mean, the fact that this man, Aldo, was caught and he will be charged might be, evidence that Malta is starting to take money laundering charges seriously. What do you think?
Hopefully it does actually, predict a sign of the future. It's sort of pressuring the government, maybe the authorities to act. But on the other hand, seeing a top official, charged with money laundering sort of shows that maybe there's a lot of work to be done.
That's very right. Now, talking about work to be done and moving on to our next story, the government is expected to roll out some new COVID-19 measures today following a spike in cases over the last couple of weeks. This comes following a meeting with Health Minister Chris Fearn and Superintendent of Public Health, Charmaine Gauci. And just a few minutes ago, a press conference was announced at 11 a.m. You can follow it live on Lovin Malta. We'll be there on the scene to cover the press conference firsthand. We're not aware what measures will be rolled out. However, it is safe to say that they are expected to be measures limiting things like mass gatherings, maybe even large events, even club nights out. What's interesting to note is just this morning, the Manuel Theatre announced that this Christmas's pantomimes have been cancelled. Christmas is obviously a few months away, but even those have been cancelled. So it does seem like events across the board are a no-go for the next few months.
Yes. So we'll see obviously how this is going to develop. This comes after yesterday. I think there were 63 new patients and 11 new recoveries. It put up the number of active cases to 537. This is after migrants have sort of been removed from the total figures. Now, we're not sure, as you said, what exactly is going to be proposed. I think Robert Abel actually mentioned potentially introducing testing at the airports. But Malta's Medical Union earlier today sort of put some proposals, I guess. Mask gathering, I think a limit of up to 10, making face masks mandatory. What's interesting about that is sort of if the government doesn't meet their expectations, there's going to be industrial action. I don't know what you think about that. It's going to be...
I mean, look, having industrial action in the middle of a pandemic is always a bit tough. And Malta has a very, questionable history when it comes to doctor strikes in the middle of important phases. However, that said, if healthcare professionals are feeling that, the government isn't taking it seriously or the people aren't taking it seriously, I totally understand them resorting to actions. What's important to note is that Prime Minister Bela said that ahead of these measures, or in fact these measures, he'll be taking, quote, a balanced approach that protects lives and livelihoods. So it'll be very interesting to see what kind of measures they roll out today. Now, talking about health, and moving on to the next story, Julian.
So 3 women were charged with prostitution offences after a late-night operation by Slima police in the Tashbish area. So essentially they were patrolling Isha, Tashbish, and they saw a 54-year-old woman sort of soliciting a couple of people. Eventually they followed her and caught her in a sexual act. They also arrested a 29-year-old and a 41-year-old woman for soliciting prostitution. Now, okay, I understand maybe the police were doing their job, but for me, I just find it really funny that sort of this strong action comes just as at a time when Malta was sort of debating decriminalizing sex work. I remember the debates, were really gathering steam, particularly before COVID-19. I actually remember people suggesting fully legalizing the practice, yet you start seeing police sort of attack the sex worker, attack maybe some NGOs called the victim in sex work. I don't know, I can't understand why this is still happening.
No, I mean, I think internationally right now, there's a massive discussion on sex work, if it should be decriminalized, if it should be legalized. You have countries like Canada, even America, where women really see themselves as sex workers, as in control of their lives, in control of their own destiny. What's interesting to note is just a few months ago, Sharabank had actually interviewed a full-time Maltese prostitute. And I thought the interview was really revealing. It really shone a light on the realities, day-to-day living of prostitutes. In this woman's view, she was in control of her own life. She made her money. And in fact, all she said was, government, I want to pay taxes. Government, I want to pay national insurance. I need protections. I'm a worker like everyone else. And, seeing someone saying that with such confidence, it did make me start thinking, should the government, should the country be taking a different approach to sex work? Another thing that really struck out to me in the story is the ages. You mentioned a 29-year-old all the way up to a 54-year-old. So this is across the age range. What's interesting here as well is that both the solicitor and the prostitute, they were both arrested. And this comes just after we were covering a story last week, Julian, if you remember, about a condom-covered street in Marsa. This back road in Marsa, just near the Malta facilities, was found covered in condoms. And I mean like scores, if not over 100 condoms. There was the wrappers as well. The Marsa mayor has since cleaned it up, but it seems like prostitution has definitely not gone away. It is very much here. I mean, just recently, actually, I was having a meal at a restaurant, a very good, popular restaurant in Gzira. And during this meal, a door opened next door. And I'm going to be honest, a prostitute walked out with a man that she was soliciting. And a few minutes later, another man walked in. So it's out there in the open. If we're going to just arrest them, I'm not sure if that's the best way forward. I think it's time for a proper discussion on sex work in Malta.
And since we had forgotten about the debate before, maybe it's time to sort of put our attentions on it yet again and sort of see that something changes.
Talking about legal changes, we've had a massive change to our Malta's legal, at least one of the men at the very top of Malta's legal system. Malta's Attorney General, Peter Grech, a man that's been in the role for a decade, has resigned. He's handed in his resignation letter. He's not out right yet. He will be leaving on the 9th of September. But this is a man who has been Attorney General for a decade. That means he was before the current Labour administration. He was actually under Gonzi as well since 2010. He's now handed in his letter to the president, George Vella. Robert Abela had hinted that his resignation was going to be coming, and he has now thanked him for a decade of work. But this man was very, very controversial, and I'm sure that his resignation has been met with a lot of positive feedback from a lot of NGOs and public individuals. What do you make of this, Julian?
As you touched on a bit, you know, the Attorney General has been subject to quite a lot of criticism in the past, particularly over inaction over major corruption allegations when it comes to Conrad Mitzi, Cambria. I mean, the list goes on and on. Most recently, if memory serves me well, he was even sort of gotten quite a lot of criticism for sending a memo to police not to seize Nexia BT service in the Panama Papers investigation. You know, it created a controversial standpoint, particularly with the criticism that he's done nothing on the cases. But I don't know, the resignation maybe is a positive move in this right direction.
Yeah, that was quite an egregious case. So if correct me if I'm wrong, he had actually told investigators from the Economic Crimes Unit to tread lightly when it came to seizing data servers from Nexia BT, a company that was quite instrumental in the Panama Papers affair. What was interesting in this Attorney General role is that he kind of has a dual role, right, Julian? He obviously is a prosecutor as an Attorney General, but he also has the role of legal advisor to the government, which put him in a very prickly situation when the government could have been at fault or breaking the law. I mean, it's pretty hard to advise a party about a case that they might be going into, and then at the same time prosecuting that same party for that crime. I don't know, are there any plans to change that dual role?
No, yes, they actually had changed it earlier this year. They changed it last year. It was part of the Venice Commission changes. So the Venice Commission changes might apply to how the new Attorney General is appointed. It would be actually very interesting to see whether a public call will be called, you know, how the new role is going to be chosen. It also speaks to the pressures of Manival, like you were saying, the Economic Crimes Unit. Attorney General Peter Grech was under a lot of pressure to act on financial crime, and when there was a lot of inaction, I guess his head was put on the chopping block.
There you go.
To sort of give a sign that change is happening to authorities abroad.
There you go. It seems like finally a chapter has closed when it comes to Malta's Attorney General. It seems like rules are being changed, and assumedly the next person to take this role will have learnt from his predecessors' challenges and lessons. Moving on to the final story of today.
Yeah, for sure. So Malta showed support for the protests currently happening in Belarus. For those of you who don't know, unrest in Belarus sort of erupted after President Alexander Lukashenko, who's been serving in the role for 26 years, is actually called the last dictator of Europe, claimed to win a very, very dubious landslide election against Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Sorry if I butchered that a bit. Essentially, Lukashenko claimed that he won 80% of the vote to Tikhanovskaya's 10%. This was highly debated. I think even the Euro Commission commented on how dubious the results were amid huge allegations of vote rigging, where actually they claimed in the areas where votes were counted properly, the opposition candidate actually won 60 to 70% of the vote. I don't know if you've been following on the news as well. There's some really horrific things happening to the demonstrators. There has been footage and reports of people being arrested, being tortured, being abused. It's really getting out of control. And yes, Malta showed its support.
That's exactly it. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets in Belarus. You've got thousands of people around the world showing their support and solidarity with the Belarusians, and that is happening as well in Malta. So yesterday, 2 demonstrations occurred, one in Valletta next to the Triton Fountain, another one in St. Julian's next to the Love Sign, very appropriate. And what was amazing is that there were Belarusians, but there were also Maltese people and other nationalities all coming together to show solidarity with the struggle that is happening in Belarus. Now, as you said yourself, you know, 80%, whenever I see an election result at 80% or 90% or whatever, it's always a red flag, you know, it's always a red flag. Now, Belarus is a country that you don't really hear too much about, and it's kind of sad to see that they still have a man in power after 26 years, the last dictator of Europe. So we definitely want to show our support and solidarity with the people looking for democracy in this country. This country is in Europe, so don't forget that. It's not too far away, guys. It's just around the corner, actually. So we'll definitely be monitoring this situation, but yeah, Shout out to the people in Belarus and shout out to all the people showing solidarity with them in Malta. I think that brings us to the end of today's show. From myself and Julian, have a day full of lovin'.